Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Goin Digital Show, the podcast for K-12 school leaders. I'm your host, Greg Goins, and we're so glad to have you with us tonight, live on the Teach Cal Network. You can connect with us a couple different ways tonight. You can always connect with us on our chat box right here on the site, so feel free to send us your questions and comments directly, and you can always connect with us on Twitter by using the EduLive hashtag. Tonight we're talking all about EdCamp, and more specifically, this show is for superintendents, principals, and school leaders who want to learn more about EdCamp and maybe start this great movement in your region or in your school district. And we have a wonderful panel of guests tonight. I'm calling these folks our EdCamp All-Stars. With us tonight we have Kristen Swanson, founder of the EdCamp movement, Joe Mazza, digital strategist and organizer of EdCamp Leadership. We also have two outstanding middle school principals from Long Island. We have Dennis Schug, and we have Donald Gately. So welcome to everyone tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Dennis, I love the Phillies you got in the background there. It's nice.
If we could, let's just kick things off and kind of go around the circle and tell everyone about yourself and why you're so passionate about EdCamp. And let's start with Kristen.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristen Swanson, and I am passionate about EdCamp because it changed the way that I learned as an educator many, many years ago. And bringing that movement and bringing that idea to other people and seeing it catch on has been one of the most rewarding professional experiences of my life. It's brought me into contact like the great people that we're here with today, and I certainly am not the same because of it. I'm a better teacher. I am, thinking of better things for kids, and all because of EdCamp.
All right, great. Joe, tell us about your experience and your background.
Hi, all. My name is Joe Mazza from outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I first experienced EdCamp at EdCamp Philly. I met people like Kristen and a whole slew of other people who had me hooked in the first 20 minutes. And I just kept thinking to myself, I've been in the field for this long, and I've never seen anything like this. So I became an instant fan and tried to implement it into my school and now the University of Pennsylvania. And I just continue to be amazed as it evolves because it's just so people-centered and people-oriented. So happy to be here. Love talking EdCamp. All
right. Dennis, tell us about you.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for inviting me here with these, these great role models. And I'm a middle school principal, been one for 6 years, 19 years in the same school district, and what's kind of interesting is we're on the east end of Long Island, and a great example of the isolation that we can sometimes experience in education. But just last year, I was privileged to be a member of the EdCamp Long Island founding team with Don Gately, and it just kind of exploded this concept of bringing people together, east to west on Long Island, really to start there. And from there, I was able to attend the NASSP conference in February, had a chance to experience EdCamp on the West Coast, which was equally as awesome, and to meet some really great people and interact and socialize around, teaching and learning. And this summer, it was a real privilege in July to bring EdCamp Leadership to Hampton Bays Middle School, where I'm the principal. And it was really exciting because it brought together some amazing, connected New York educators, and it really just, it was an awakening for some people new to the movement from the East and from the West, and it really is starting to bridge that reality for us in New York. We're excited about that, and looking forward to the next EdCamp Long Island in the fall.
Great. Don, what can you tell us about your experience?
Oh yeah, well, my wife is in the business too. You used the expression before, the family business. My wife is a director of curriculum down the road from where my school is, and we attended EdCamp NYC in New York City, and they do a little bit of a modified format. They wrap it up around 1 o'clock, and then we got so excited leaving there. We said, let's get a group together and do something on Long Island. And then prior to doing the Long Island EdCamp, I had an opportunity to go down to EdCamp Philly, and they really, I guess they were the first one, and they do an amazing job with it. I think for me, what I'm most passionate about is, number one, as everyone seems to be saying, and I agree, it's put me in contact with so many amazing individuals who are willing both to share their expertise and their support. I've really become friends with Dennis and many other members of my, sort of professional learning network. through EdCamp. And I think for me, the secret of EdCamp, what's most transformational about it, is that it really puts learning front and center. Not PowerPoints, not so-called expertise, not egos, not, I don't know, it really makes it all about learning, and I think that's what makes it so exciting for me.
Very good. And Kristen, I guess we'll come back to you. I know the EdCamp Foundation had some very exciting news this week, so why don't you tell us where you've been and tell us all about it?
Yeah, so I really want to focus tonight on the teaching and learning piece. I really want to focus on the heart of what EdCamp is about, and really EdCamp is about joining a group of really passionate people like the folks who are on this call, and deciding that as a school leader you're going to make that change in your school or in your region or in your district. And so, when we had this idea about 5 years ago, it was really an accident. We had actually all stumbled into something called a bar camp, which has to do with computer coding, and we loved the concept that there were no sessions on the morning of the event, and everyone built the content together. We loved the fact that it was really interactive, and it was all conversation-based, and there were no presentations or PowerPoints. And we really loved the fact that even though we were ragtag educators who really didn't fit, we were welcomed with open arms into the community there and asked for our input. And at the end of the day, the group of educators that I was with, we all looked at each other and said, we have to try this for teachers. And when we had the very first EdCamp, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if it was going to work. We didn't know if anyone was going to show up. We didn't know if anyone was going to post sessions. But it did work. We had about 100 people that very first day, and felt really excited by the momentum in the room. And the funniest part was the very end of the day, I remember Dan Callahan saying, hey, let's put this up on a wiki. Maybe somebody else will want to try it. And from there, it just started to take off. And the first year, we had 8 EdCamps, and that skyrocketed to 200. And now we've got over 1,000 EdCamps in dozens of countries, and we can't even keep up with it. And so, for me, it's about this idea that, we can take back control of our professional learning. We are empowered people that can drive it. We don't have to wait for someone else to drive it for us. And it's been amazing to see how that message has resonated with people across the country, including, everyone who's here tonight.
And just so maybe our viewers that don't know, you were awarded a pretty large grant this last week. Can you talk about that a little bit and how will that change the EdCamp movement?
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that tonight. I really want to honor the organizers who are here on this call, but we were very fortunate to receive a large grant donation, which we're going to use to support EdCamps who need it. So as you know, there's a lot of work and a lot of sweat that goes into organizing an EdCamp, and we just want to make it a little bit easier. So now if you need breakfast or other materials to support your event, you can let us know, and we're also going to be putting into place a couple of other programs so that we can get together EdCamp organizers across the country to really deepen our understanding of this practice and make sure that, to Don's point, we're really staying focused on the teaching and learning.
And I was telling some of our guests tonight before we came on air that my first EdCamp experience was actually at EdCamp Leader in St. Louis, Missouri in the spring. And Joe, I know that you were instrumental in putting that together. Tell us a little bit about that initiative and what your general thoughts were as to how important that was for school leaders.
Yeah, for me, I just was trying not to screw it up, be quite honest with you, and remembering the first time I called Kristen and said, hey, we want to do this and we want to do more than one on one day, and what are all the ways to go about this? I mean, I have planned them for my school and district and for parents, but doing one across leaders, especially when the majority of leaders today in 2015 still don't necessarily know what an unconference is, let alone an EdCamp. So it's really tricky, and I think that we relied on the people are on this call. Why should we continue to have an EdCamp leadership in Philadelphia year after year when there are plenty of other capable student, teacher, parent, administrator leaders out there that can run with this locally. And if we really want this to go from a movement, and I think some would argue getting a multi-million-dollar grant takes you from a movement into something extremely relevant and mainstream in the field. And I know our fearless leader here is very very modest, but anyway, it's a big deal. And you know, we really want school leaders to understand that this is culture cultivating or culture changing. You know, this is something that when we're trying to change a culture, it doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't happen by top-down approaches. It doesn't happen by sit and get PD. You know, people have got to be inspired and empowered to come to work every day and not take a sick day because they know it's going to be one of those boring in-service days. So for us, just kind of leveraging the people that have already shown they can do this, they've been there, they're dedicated, they're passionate, they volunteered over and over again to try and run one of them in their own town or their own state. So we thought we'd get 4 or 5. We ended up with 18 across the United States. We had one location in Chile and one location in China. And next year, I've already got 100 people signed up on the document to be leaders in certain areas next summer. So we're going to be talking about that in the upcoming month. You know, not sure we're going to be interested in having them all on one day, but what if we could fill up a summer for leaders and go right through the summer and have all these different locations all over the place bringing leaders together. So you could not only get to one, but you could get to others. And again, empowering the network to grow, people to learn from one another. And I just, as a principal, I couldn't see it happening in my school until I did it myself. Until I took the risk myself so I could go to my teachers and say, hey, I went into this. I had no idea what it was going to be about, but we're trying to be innovative, and sometimes being innovative is trying things that are out of our comfort level. And so just growing it from there, and you know, sky's the limit. But it was a really great experience. We continue to get great feedback. NESSP, NEESP, and Penn were really great in their own partnership and supporting it and helping it go mainstream this summer.
And it was a wonderful experience for me and really led to some great opportunities. We just hosted the very first Ed Camp in our region on Saturday. My school district was the host, and it was one of those things where I wasn't sure if anyone was going to show up, and we had almost 100 people come on a Saturday and spend their time, and the reception was just incredible. And that was a direct result of attending Kristen's workshop at the ISTE conference in Philly over the summer, and then going to Ed Camp Leaders. So, I mean, you've inspired at least one superintendent here tonight to move forward. So let's go to our other school administrators. Donald, can you tell us a little bit about Ed Camp Long Island and what your experience has been there?
Sure, thanks, Greg. Well, I think one of the things that I'm hearing, and one of the things I've said to other organizers or people who experience is it's sort of a foolproof model. I hope that we're giving to people who've never been to an Ed Camp an adequate enough picture of how it works. But you know, if you're a teacher and you've never been to an Ed Camp before, and this is how we did it at ours. We had it at a local school, and we designated about 10 classrooms for workshops. We did that because, I don't know, we had anticipated about 250 people. We had about 175 administrators, teachers, board members, and parents who came. There was just a blank board, and people took Post-it notes, and I love the poster behind Kristen because it gives you that sort of, it's a great guide to help people focus on, well, what am I doing? Like, if I put a Post-it up there, what am I looking to do? And it just means you're going to help facilitate a conversation about some topic of interest to you, or perhaps something, it might be something you have a bit of expertise in. It might be, I've seen people put up Post-its that said, you know, I need help differentiating for a self-contained special ed class, or I need help differentiating for ELL learners, and people jumped into that room to share their expertise with the person who took the initiative to put the Post-it up there. Then someone's sitting there at a computer and they're populating a Google form so that people can carry the schedule around with them throughout the day, and they know where to go, because one of the aphorisms of Ed Camp is the law of 2 feet, because if you go to a session and it's not fulfilling your needs, you're not just welcome to, you're encouraged to, you know, feel free to get up and go to something else that is more in line with what you were looking for, and there's no hard feelings, and because it's not about egos, it's about Ed Camp's about learning. Okay, it's all about learning, and no one has to feel that they're hurting anybody's feelings. So we had 4 sets of sessions, about 8 to 10 workshops within each, and people would be there that morning saying, "Hey, I have an interest in this," and someone might say, "I'll do that with you. Let's facilitate a discussion." I know Dennis met up with a parent leader from, maybe he'll talk about that, from actually from the Philly, Jersey area, and they did a session together on parent engagement, and that's how the day just goes, and it's very organic, and I think you go as an organizer. I think you go into it with a lot of trepidation, thinking, "Is this going to work?" And I'm so grateful to Kristen for doing a Google Hangout with myself and Dennis and others, members of our organizing team, to help us. She mostly reassured us that it was going to go great, and it was so true. It's really it's a great template for fantastic professional development, and our day went great, and our next one is taking place October 3rd, and we've already got over 325 people registered, and school didn't even start yet. So I think that our participation level this year is really going to grow. So we're really excited about it, Greg.
That's great news, and I can tell the movement is spreading even more and more each day. So, Dennis, I want to bring you in, also a middle school principal. And how have you seen, I guess, what's the reaction been in your school district, and how has it evolved over the last few years?
Well, I think one of the most exciting things that I've seen firsthand is that, this idea of, learning and leadership, they're very sensitive topics, they seem like, and people kind of ebb and flow on, where they stand on these things. And you offer up an ed camp, and you see that the leaders come out, the learners come out, and it's really a pretty amazing thing. One of my favorite anecdotes was from Ed Camp Long Island last year. I had offered it out to our teachers. It would require them on a Saturday to drive probably an hour and a half west, on their own time. And I knew there were a few people that were heading out, and one of my teachers came out. I did not expect to see her there. She was not necessarily a connected educator. She was just curious. She was wanted to come out with her a few of her colleagues. She heard me talk about it a little bit, and she got there. And her takeaway at lunch, I said, "So, how was it?" And she said, "Well, a guy with a bushy mustache taught me how to get on Twitter," and that man was Tom Whitby. And from there, this is someone who the fire was ignited that day, because since then she's become a leader in our district in the area of Genius Hour and passion projects, and she's my go-to to say, "Hey, I need you to help explain this to a parent," or "We're going to talk about this at a team meeting." And that's really, I think, where the magic is, that it's got such an interesting effect that you can offer this out, and you just never know who's going to show up and what their takeaway is going to be and what the true impact is going to be. This was a transformative element to things happening in our middle school classrooms, and really pushed us to work harder and do better for kids. And I'm really excited about that part of it in particular.
And it seems as the Ed Camp movement has continued to grow, it almost seems like Twitter has been the pipeline for all this growth. And Joe, I'll go to you, although you have your mic muted. Let's go to Chris.
I was just trying to be respectful.
Okay, let's go to you, Joe. Do you think social media has played a pretty huge role in the growth of Ed Camp and a lot of the really neat things we're doing now in education?
Well, I guess I'll just use the example of sitting here on the bay in Wildwood, New Jersey. And,
this is not fair. This is not a fair example.
It could be Saturday morning, and I could be, on vacation. I just started my vacation the other day. Finally, it's been a long year, an awesome year, but a busy one. So soaking it up down here, and I can PD from the treadmill, from the dock here, from a fishing boat, from wherever I am in 2015, and that asynchronous collaboration, networking, relationship building, Ed Camp, whatever that is, I think it's just not, leveraged enough, and partly because leaders don't know it's possible quite yet. So with each one of these Ed Camps, you saw, a couple months ago, Periscope came out, and then what do you see? Just 2 days later in an Ed Camp, you've got just about every session from that Ed Camp being periscoped out. Now, we certainly have to talk about privacy and all those different things, but, these tools are evolving. And just because we're using Twitter now doesn't mean that's going to be what we're using next year or the year after. So, part of the innovative lens is just continuing to keep your ear to the ground, being a student of the game, and listening, especially to our students, who I've learned most of the social media that I use from.
And Kristen, I know you get this question all day, every day, and now that I'm involved a little bit in my region, I get it every day as well. What is an Ed Camp, and how do you explain that to a superintendent or a principal that may not be a connected educator and just trying to figure out what this thing is called Ed Camp? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and I think Don started us off by sort of explaining some of the things that make an Ed Camp an Ed Camp. But the first thing that I would say is that when you're doing an Ed Camp, there are very few ways that you can get it wrong. It's a very open protocol that really encourages communication and collaboration. And basically, to sort of summarize it in just a moment or two, the day sort of unfolds like this. People come into a room, and when they're in that room, and there's no session board, there's no agenda, there's just a big blank grid. And over coffee and donuts and bagels, people discuss what they want to talk about, and they put those ideas up on the grid. Anyone can come, it's free, and anyone can be a presenter or a sharer by posting their session idea up on that grid. After a brief kickoff for logistics, then people separate into those conversations. And to Don's point, you might be wondering, well, how do we know if those conversations are going to be any good? And really, it self-curates using the rule of 2 feet. So you go where you grow. If you're in a session and it's not meeting your needs, this is one of those rare times as an educator when you get to be truly selfish. And you get to say, you know what, this isn't meeting my needs, I'm going to go somewhere else. And the ability to sort of, take back what it is that you need becomes really invigorating along with those conversations that you have. Because especially in a world where we have access to so much information, it's much less important to have an expert, and it's much more important to have shared expertise. And that's really what this protocol strives to unearth. And then at the end of the day, after all of those conversations and sessions, we have either a share out, or it's sometimes called a smackdown, where people sort of reflect on what it is that they've gained through these collaborative connections and conversations with other people across their region. And every time I think about Ed Camp, I think about the fact that it brings together people who might not be together otherwise, and it encourages conversations that might not happen otherwise. And I think that that's really what it's about. It's just about providing the space, and then everyone who's there really provides the fire. And so, that's kind of the 1-minute overview of how to EdCamp. But if you want to know how to EdCamp, just head over to edcamp.org, and you can check out how to do it. There's lots of free materials there to help you. You can also apply for EdCamp in a Box, where you can just fill out a quick little form, and someone from the foundation will get in touch and help you with your event, and that's completely free. And then you can also check out the upcoming events. The best way to figure out how to EdCamp is to try one, and there are hundreds of events coming up between now and the end of the year that are all free that you could check out. So those are some great ways to get started.
And that website has some tremendous resources, videos, different links. We can also talk a little bit about EdCamp in a Box. I mean, the foundation will actually mail you out. I call it a kit, but it's really a starter's kit. There's also a great book that you can get on the EdCamp movement that I know you are a part of. So a lot of great resources there. Donald, jumping back to you, in terms of, I guess from my experience, the limited experience I do have, we all know teachers like instructions. They like specifics. These are the rules. These are the 10 steps on how we're going to do something today. EdCamp is completely different, and I found when we had our EdCamp this last Saturday that people wanted to know, well, give me step 1, give me step 2, give me step 3, but I think they were also invigorated by the freedom of kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah, I agree. And the teachers from my building who went to Ed Camp Long Island jumped in and did sessions too. So I don't know what. Again, I think there's something about the model. It's very contagious. It's very motivating, and people do kind of jump in. I found that too, Greg. That I wondered would my staff be sort of face-to-face lurking and just taking it all in. But a lot of them jumped in and did sessions, and they really liked it. I found. It's interesting. I think Kristen gives great advice. Go to one. If you're thinking of organizing one in your area, try to hit one up and go to one and get a sense of what it looks like. That was very helpful to me. And then when we were selling it in other venues, it was always good for me to have 1 or 2 or 5 people who had been before who could speak about it.
And I guess the next question is for both of you that are school administrators. Now that your faculty and staff see how powerful and how wonderful this is, how do you go back to a traditional model in your school district? I think that would be very challenging. I'm kind of dealing with that now because I have a lot of teachers saying, are we going to do this again? When are we going to do it? And they can't even begin to think about not doing something like an Ed Camp. So, Dennis, how are you going to handle that?
Well, I think that's an important point. There are your standard, professional development sessions or your training sessions, and I believe that they will always hold their place in a school system in a traditional model. But I think one of the things that will evolve is as we have more people engaging in the Ed Camp model is that learning is a process. Nobody owns it. It's ongoing. There's not a start and a stop time to it. And one of the things that I really enjoy about the Ed Camp experience is that when you get into a conversation or you're in a Voxer group or a Twitter chat, you're synthesizing information. So you're still reading, you're still writing, you're still having conversations. But the more that you interact, the more that you're really enriching your own learning experience. So if and when you do go to your next professional development, your official standard professional development session, you're enriching your own experience. And I saw that in San Diego myself at NASSP. You could distinctly see who the connected educators were and who weren't. And being a connected educator really does enhance every experience, every interaction you have. So whether it's a standard meeting or a standard professional development session, you're approaching it differently. You're approaching it more of a learner who's going to go in and really synthesize that information and think about it differently and bring it back and implement it differently. So I think that's where I kind of stand on that at this point.
One of the emails that Dennis and I sent out last year encouraging our colleagues to push it in their school, the subject line was, I can't take credit for this, and there really is great professional resources on Kristen's site, and but I saw someone had used this subject line, we're ruining professional development, do you want to help? It was great, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, Greg. It's very hard for me then to go back and do professional development in my own school and in our district without having experienced this. And I find it a little difficult to go to conventional conferences now because if I'm not really loving what's going on, I want to get up and leave. I want to find something that's more suitable to what I'm looking for. So it does corrupt you. It does kind of corrupt your view in a good way. We've done Ed Camp style faculty meetings in my school, and we had our district-wide superintendent's conference day last year in an Ed Camp style format. I use that expression. Because it's not the same. It's not the same when people, to some extent, are compelled to be there. And if it's a superintendent's conference or a faculty meeting, my folks they have to attend. But they really appreciate the opportunity to share, to decide what their professional development needs are. And we had some really great success with bringing it back into our district. And I think that is building. That's building enthusiasm for those folks now if they haven't been to an actual Ed Camp to go.
I found one of the, I don't want to call it a challenge, but one of the conversations I had a lot as we promoted our Ed Camp in my school district for our region, everyone really felt like it was a technology conference, and I really had to make it a point to tell people that, technology may be a pivotal part of what you're discussing, but you can also have some unplugged categories. I mean, if teachers want to get together and talk about how to make better bulletin boards, I mean, that's a great topic for an Ed Camp. And so, Kristen, can you kind of weigh in on that a little bit?
Sure. Well, really the parameter for EdCamp is that it's about teaching and learning. So as long as those bulletin boards are helping teaching and learning, which as a skeptic I might question, but I really think that it's about anything under the sun that helps kids learn better. Or learn in a more personalized way. And so one of the reasons that we get a reputation for being techie is because we had no marketing, and so when it spread through social media, it tended to attract people who were more tech savvy. But that's really just a matter of how we reached our original organizers and how we reached sort of some of the original event attendees. But we encourage all kinds of conversations outside of technology. We've also seen events pop up that are sort of themed. So we had, for example, EdCamp Social Studies. We have EdCamp Leader, obviously, as a specific theme of sorts. And then we've had a lot of other different kinds of events that really strive to help people get out of the mindset that this is really just about technology. It's just, it's really about teaching and learning.
And Joe, I know you work a lot in higher ed, and you talk to a lot of teachers that will be administrators in the future. How has your curriculum changed, I guess, with the digital transformation that we're going through? And I mean, can you see having EdCamp as a class as part of your curriculum moving forward?
Everyone in our program is a practicing superintendent, director, principal for at least 5 years. Some of them have been in their roles for 20 years. For example, Pedro Rivera, the Pennsylvania Department of Education secretary, he's a second-year doctoral student in our program. So I'll actually have him in class this year, which is kind of interesting. But last year was my first year in higher ed teaching the digital leadership course. And, during our course, of course we read the EdCamp Foundation's book, and then we did a mock EdCamp during one class. Following that, a couple months later, students from that class organized their own mid-career doctor program ed leadership EdCamp. So we had, current students, alums, faculty, and some alums that are traveling in for it. So that was very successful. We had about 80 people there. And it was 2 hours, like an EdCamp Express, so to speak. And this year, a change has been made, so every single weekend, we're EdCamping from 12 to 2 on Saturday. So it's already in the structure. We're being proactive about it. We're not waiting around. That same group that planned last year's is helping us put the structure in place, because we not only want current students and the faculty to be exposed to these opportunities to evolve their class, but also we want alumni that are out there working in the field to be able to come back physically and virtually. That's the piece we're really trying to do well this year, because frankly, just haven't found a whole lot of digital pieces that are dependable. And I don't want someone to just be on the screen. I want the person on the other end of the screen, if they're taking time out of their family schedule or wherever they are, to be able to engage and interact and learn and whatnot. So I just look at us as organizers to continue to hold the bar there. And if you're going to an EdCamp where every session is about technology, then I'm not sure that we were doing the best we could to help make sure that board was well-rounded, for folks that were coming to the EdCamp. So we're trying to embed it deeply. It's a slow process, but it's certainly something that people see a lot of promise of. I still have a job. I'm still teaching the same course this year, so the feedback was good enough for that to happen. And now we're focused on parents as well. And I put out a post today. I know we're running out of time, but I did put out a post recapping yesterday's event and also talking about the parent camp that's coming up on October 26th at the Department of Ed. We'd love to have anyone in the country register free for that, and we can get you there.
And that's a good point. And Kristen, I know that EdCamp was actually put into action at the White House, or maybe with the Department of Ed. And what was the reaction that you got from Department of Ed folks?
Yeah, so this past June we had our second annual EdCamp United States Department of Education, and the reception that we've gotten there has been incredibly warm and incredibly open. So, what we found was that when we approached them with the idea, they immediately took to it. They said that this is exactly the kind of conversation and feedback that we want to hear from educators. And, that every year we consistently get, 500-600 registrations, even though we only have 100 spots just due to capacity in the building. And it's amazing to see how many educators want to come out. They want their voice to be heard. They want to dialogue with these policymakers so that we can be the ones driving the change for kids. And their openness to that has been humbling and really overwhelming.
And Joe also, yeah, go ahead, Don.
No, I agree with everything Kristen said, and she did a great job of organizing that. I had an opportunity, as Joe did as well, to attend EdCamp DOE. It was a great experience, and I felt very supported by the Department of Education.
I think that's great, and that's just going to continue to strengthen the movement. And, Joe kind of hit on the fact that EdCamp is also evolving. Now we're talking about maybe having EdCamp parent nights and doing things with students throughout the day. So, I mean, where do we see, what's the next wave of EdCamp per se? Anyone that's can answer that question?
Well, I really see EdCamp as an ethos, and that ethos is about empowerment. It's about empowering someone to see themselves as having something worthy to share. So, that ethos can be spread to kids, can be spread to parents, it can be spread to anyone who really needs to learn something, especially if what they're trying to learn is something that other people in the community also care about. So I think we're going to see, Stu Camp and Parent Camp spread far and wide, and I think we've only begun to feel the effects of what this model can do.
Again, going back to exposure, when we did a parent camp in 2012 at NAP, it was because we left the board up there from the teacher in service that happened earlier in the day. So just by leaving that board up and having the parents come into their home and school meeting and say, hey, what did you guys do today? And then I took time to explain it. And then all of a sudden, Gwen Pescatore's like, hey, maybe we could do that. And it's like, all right, let's roll with it, and then it just takes off and it's organic. So, I think we need to find more ways to make sure that it is mainstream. You're seeing conferences have it as a part of their conference because they know that without it, they're lacking. They're lacking that networking part. They're lacking that relationship building. Exchanging your Twitter handle could be looked at as a 2015 way that we exchange business cards. And why not do that in an ed camp on the first day of the conference like NASSP did and NNSTOY did? Kristen, we need to add that poster behind you to the ed camp in a box. I would just love to hang that on the door, just so people continue to talk about it and see it. And they might hear it everywhere, but how many buzzwords in education are we constantly hearing? Let's take the next step. Let's not wait for somebody to put this on our plates. Let's advocate for it as leaders, whether we're a student, a teacher, a parent, or an administrator.
So the poster is it's not in the box, but the PDF download is in lots of different sizes and shapes. So,
noted.
Yep. Get on it. Casey Bell. Shout out to Casey Bell at Shake Up Learning, who created that poster and did a fabulous job with it.
Awesome.
And one of the things that I really liked about EdCamp, and I think a lot of school leaders will like about EdCamp, is all you really need is a time, a date, and a place. And there is a lot of planning depending on how, if you want to get corporate sponsors and try to figure out what to do with food, but you just need a place and a lot of coffee, and that's what I really like about EdCamp. And has that been your experience, those of you that are building administrators?
I was actually speaking, we're working on sponsors for our EdCamp, and I was speaking today with a potential sponsor. And I was saying to him, I said, I don't know how to say this, and probably people don't often say it to you, but I don't need a lot of money. I said, only a little bit will help us get breakfast and lunch, and that's really all we want to do. If you want to buy us T-shirts or you want to do other stuff, that's all great. But I'm sure you don't hear this too often. But I'm not asking you for too much money. And I was saying to these guys before, I found it easy to sell the model because I'm so passionate about it myself. I'm a great salesman for it because I have all that passion.
And it's hard to beat the price too. I mean, free registration, free Wi-Fi. it's just a great opportunity. Now, in our particular case, we did offer teacher certification credit in Illinois. We call them CPDUs, so everyone received 5 hours of CPDUs, which I think was also a selling point to get people there. I mean, do you see that with your ed camps? Are teachers asking for credit for professional development as well as the professional learning?
Yeah, we do that. In our district did it as well. And I know in New York State they're broadening the regulations for teacher professional development and increasing the number of hours. So I think in that regard, I think some teachers will find their way to this even more because it's much more meaningful than some of the other things that they could potentially, I guess, use to fill those required hours.
And so the next step would be, wouldn't it be great if we got credit for Twitter chats or Voxer groups or those kind of things? So maybe Joe can get on that and make that happen for us.
Somebody out there is doing that, right, Joe? There's someone's doing that.
Well, this is already on my agenda, for the Pennsylvania Department of Education. But I think again we've got to be able to articulate quality. We have to assess that there's learning going on around teaching and learning. I think that, we know it is, but we need to continue, and hopefully as we move forward and continue to evolve, edcamp.org is a great new website. Hopefully as we continue to evolve that, we can find a way that we can, get that learning assessed and create some kind of a space where when our superintendent or our director of HR or the Department of Ed asks for what we did, there can be not just a certificate, but some kind of a reflective piece, that is part of your portfolio, that talks about your learning and your focus. So when I'm interviewing a candidate for a principal position, maybe I can check out their learning. I mean, if we're being transparent on Twitter, then why shouldn't we be transparent about, our professional learning, our personal learning?
Right.
So obviously it'll evolve, not in the time that we want it to, but obviously we've got to think through that traditional lens a little bit when we're talking about the Department of Education.
And there was a really challenging study. Yeah, there was a very challenging study that was reported on in Ed Week last week. And forgive me, maybe someone wants to put the link in here to it. That looked at the outcomes of professional development and some of the money that's spent on professional development, and it was a very challenging piece and a very challenging study because it calls into question the outcome of the I think they put the number at something like $13 billion. They said the average teacher over a 10-year period puts in nearly the equivalent of a full school year in professional development hours, and the outcomes just aren't there. So I think that this is a real fraught time. I feel that is a really opportunity for the EdCamp model of professional development to thrive and accelerate, I think, in light of research like that. It has people really scratching their heads and asking themselves some really some very challenging questions, right?
I think also, something that I think about quite a bit are, think about our most highly effective teachers and the time that they're putting in. The hours and hours, 12 hours a day, working in summers to prepare for a school year, grading papers, the things that they do beyond, lesson planning, beyond the traditional scope of the, workday. This is interesting. It's an interesting segment of the conversation because it's really a matter of, intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic motivators. And I think the more that we're offering out, opportunities for EdCamp conversations and experiences, the more we're going to move away from, what do I get for? I think that will always exist, but I think your high flyers, will always, fly above that radar. I really believe that. And those are the people that are coming to EdCamps and sharing and collaborating, and they are our most creative, they're our best resources, really, for making this something like this succeed, I believe.
Tell you, if I had a job opening and I was a principal, I'd go to an EdCamp near me, and I'd be looking for the teachers there because that's the caliber of people there that are there for the vocation, not the job. And
yeah,
they're everywhere.
I just hired somebody today from EdCamp Long Island last year. So we've seen a lot of people have come into our networks, and it's been a great opportunity again because we've put in a lot of face-to-face pieces because our EdCamp group, we schedule an EdCamp Long Island meetup about once every month. And we meet in local places to get together and just chat, and it's just an opportunity for you to see your EdCamp Long Island friends, and that's been a great way to meet new people and also network and become acquainted with people who are in the field who are looking for positions. So, Joe, that's been great.
And those are all great points. As a school superintendent, I'm sitting here thinking, we probably need to change our teacher application in my school district to include things like your Twitter handle, your Voxer name, and how many ed camps you've been to.
Yeah.
That may be something that we're really going to dive into, and those are going to be pivotal questions about what kind of background experience they've had in ed camp and those type of things. Thoughts on that?
I love it. Sounds like your next post.
Yeah.
Could be.
I think too, Greg. I think so much of this comes down to modeling for us as leaders, that we have to be willing to come out in front of this and say, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to give this a try. I'm going to approach it with an open mind, and we'll see. That's where our followers will come out, and then eventually our leaders. And I think a quote that really rings with me on this is that it was a quote that I put up on the marquee at our school when we had EdCamp leadership. It's leadership and learning are indispensable to each other, and that was from a JFK speech that he never made, actually. But that was a really powerful thing for me to really think about, contemplate, that if as leaders we're willing to come out in front on being learners first, why wouldn't anybody give it a shot if they trust us and we have those relationships in place?
Yeah.
Great point from everyone tonight. I think this is a great conversation. If you're a superintendent or a principal out there watching tonight, you need to connect with this wonderful group of guests and try to connect with me and anyone in your area that's been involved in EdCamp. It's just a great way to provide professional learning. And Kristen, this kind of circle back around, if there are school leaders out there that are thinking about maybe putting something like this together, I guess my first thought is, what is the ideal number for an EdCamp?
You only need 2 people to have a conversation. But of course, if I'm being really honest, I think anything more than about, I don't know, once you get above 500, it becomes a little crazy and unwieldy. Anything less is great. I kind of use some very informal math of, I take the number of people who register. So if 200 people register, I cut that number in half. And then usually we get to the number of people who will actually show up. So, if 200 people register, about 100 people will show up. And I usually have a gathering room or a classroom available for about every 25 people or so that I believe are going to walk through the door. But it's pretty flexible. And again, I've seen really great ed camps with 50 people, and I've seen really great ed camps with 300 people, and I've seen really great ed camps with 500 people. But it's really about making those connections. So sometimes bigger isn't always better. It's more about the relationships and the ability to feel comfortable offering your voice. So I think it's really about what you need and what you're trying to create for that experience for the people in the room.
And from the research that I was able to dive into as we prepared, there were really 2 rules of thought. The first was, maybe you want to have it on a Saturday, and you want people that are intrinsically motivated to come. Those are the people that you really want to engage with and be there. But of course, you have school leaders that want to try to have it at a Teacher Institute day or a faculty type of day. Is there a right way or a wrong way to do that? Or what's your thought? What works best?
So to actually fit the definition of an ed camp, it has to be voluntary. So it doesn't matter what day it's on, as long as it's not required. If it is required, it's in the style of ed camp, but it's certainly not ed camp. And that's because it comes back to this, intrinsic motivation piece that Dennis was talking about. The people who are there need to be there because they want to be there. So ed camps are built on the tenets of open space technology. Which started many years ago in other fields. And open space technology says that the people who come are the right people, the things that happen are the right things, and the amount of time it takes is the amount of time that it takes. And so to truly adhere to that, it doesn't matter what day it happens on. It just matters that the people who are there because they want to be.
And to both Dennis and Donald, you both have a lot of experience organizing these type of events in your area. Did you have a committee, or were there a couple key people, or I mean, how do you get people involved, and what kind of roles do they share?
Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. I'm sorry. Well, I was very fortunate because I basically I showed up at the right time and had the right people around me. We had an incredible core group of EdCamp Long Island people, including Don and his wife Danielle, among many, many others. We had an amazing group that had attended EdCamp Long Island who said, hey, how do I get more involved? So we batched them in. I had some incredible Hampton Bays people, some of my teachers, some of my staff who said, let's talk about how I can get involved. We had our members of our New York Ed Chat group who rallied around this and took a long ride out east to participate in the day. And I really think that's what was really incredible about it for me were those people that were there physically in person. In addition, what was just phenomenal, when you get connected as a connected educator, you realize how generous people can be. And somebody like Joe, who I know is very humble, he offered out a Voxer group that was very instrumental in supporting the cause, and all you had to do was drop a question in there or a concern or hey, how do you? And all of a sudden you had people coming from from California, from across the world, across the globe, basically saying, oh, here's my form that I use, or here's how you navigate Ticket Leap. I'll do that for you. Let me take care of that. And it's just it's a really special community, and that's what you get. When you surround yourself with great people like this, they're very generous to the cause. So that's, in short, that's and I really benefited from that as someone that learned so much from this experience, the generosity of others.
Yeah, our planning team has become a real tight-knit group of sort of friends. Our EdCamp Long Island planning team, and we're expanding a bit. We're working with another group, kind of joined us, and now we're planning Nerd Camp Long Island, which is taking place the month after. Nerd camps are ed camps with a specific literacy focus. So there'll be authors joining us and lots of discussions around reading and writing and literacy, really, and a passion for books. So we're very excited about that too. But it's just become a real neat little engine of of getting things done. And everyone's really willing to jump in and do things. It's been great. I think the technology helps a lot too. If you're going to put these committees together, we have a lot. We don't always meet in person. We have these great meetups, but a lot of times we're doing Google Hangouts. We're just communicating through email, and so the technology definitely aids in in getting this done for sure.
Well, we've had a great conversation tonight, and we're coming to the end of the hour, and I want to thank all of you so much for being here to share your expertise. I think it's been such a wonderful experience for school leaders to learn a little bit more about EdCamp and how maybe they can implement that in their school district. So as we wrap up, let's just go through one at a time, and if you could speak directly to a superintendent or a principal tonight that's thinking about EdCamp, give them your best elevator speech on why they should take the plunge. Let's start with Kristen.
Take the plunge because it will change the way that you see your staff, it will change the way you see yourself, and it will change the way you see learning.
Joe?
Every month we're ed camping at Penn, and if you'd like to check it out, even if you've only got time for lunch or a couple hours, you've got a personal invite to come any weekend. Just get in touch with me and I'll let you know the dates. But you have a choice. You can do this alone, or you can get involved with other people that can help you, and we can't do this work alone anymore.
Very good. Donald?
Participation in EdCamp is transformational, so I think you really owe it to yourself to give it a try. And it really works. It's a great model for learning and growth.
Very good. Dennis, what's your take?
I think one of the biggest things I ask of myself and everybody else around me is approach learning with an open mind. Approach this experience with an open mind. If we're going to expect that of kids and of teachers, we have to expect that of ourselves. And I think that the EdCamp model, getting involved in EdCamp, it really brings out the best in people. It really does. it's a community, but it's something that it really transcends, what happens within the four walls of the classroom. It makes learning real and a lifelong pursuit.
And where can we connect with each one of you, either on Twitter, Voxer, or maybe a blog? Kristen, where's the best place to connect with you?
If you head over to my blog at kristenswanson.org, you can find all the ways to get a hold of me, Twitter, Instagram, however you'd like to follow.
Very good. Joe?
I actually just changed my website this week. It was leadlearner.com. That's going to be turning into a book that Derek McCoy and I are writing and finishing. And so I am at c64kid.com, like Commodore 64, c64kid.com.
Great. Donald, where can we find you?
I have my professional personal Twitter account is Donald _Gately. My school is Jericho Middle School, so we've got a school account where we brand what we're doing there and put out the message of all the great stuff going on in my school. My blog is In the Middle of Learning, or dfgately@wordpress.com. Thanks, Greg. All
right. And Dennis, where can we find you?
On Twitter, at Schug_Dennis. My blog is Learning Leadership. It's a monthly blog, just reflections of a middle school principal. And we also have a school account as well that we use to foster two-way communication with parents and community in Hampton Bays.
All right, very good. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I think it was a great show. And again, if you are a school leader and you are looking at being a part of the EdCamp movement, please connect with all these great guests tonight and take that plunge and do something special in your school district or your area. I want to give a big shout out tonight to Oscar Staten, who produces Goin Digital Show. He's back in the studio. And you can also check out Oscar with the Teachers Talk Live on Tuesday night at teachcow.com. And Oscar's doing great things over at the Teach Cow Network. So with that, I want to say a special thank you once again to all of our guests. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Goin Digital Show. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks for having us, Greg.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.